Yeah.
One of the official office meeting rooms. 12 PowerPoint. Right, it's 2 minutes past. Okay, so let's crack on now. Let's just make sure I'm sharing the screen. Yep, cool. So welcome everybody to the data-driven approach. I'm your host, Ian Corrigan. I'm the commercial director here at Cool Care, and I've got with me Andrew Long, who's the founder of Adore Care Homes, and he's going to tell us all about kind of what kind of data he gathers, what he does with it, and kind of how he feeds it back to his sort of staff and residents, and the whole piece. So very quickly, we've got an introduction. Who's Cool Care? Just for those that you might not know. We've marketed this out, kind of this webinar out via Care England, so not every person on the call is potentially knows Cool Care that well, so I'll cover that off. A little bit from Andrew about who Adore Care Homes. We've got a market outlook from our general sort of wider group, which I'll explain who they are and kind of what they're saying, and then we'll look at Andrew's data sources, his analysis, and then kind of what he does with the data. So Cool Care is part of the L&T Care Developments. Cool Care being the software component, whereas L&T Care Developments design, build, furnish, and operate care homes. Within that group is Danforth Care Homes and Oyster. Previously in that group has been Ideal Care Homes, and so they've got a lot of experience in building and operating. Andrew's two care homes, Adore Care Homes, were built by L&T Construction. So that's kind of the connection there. That's how we kind of know Andrew so well. Cool Care is ultimately all about making operating the care home easier, more efficient, and more profitable. Within it is inquiry and occupancy management, invoicing, and workforce management. So staff clocking in and out, rotas, rosters, all of the kind of piece there. We've been around since the late 90s, 1998. Our average customer length is 8+ years, and in software that is quite remarkable. But even more remarkable, our rolling retention rate is 99.77%. When we tend to keep customers very long term. And again, from a software perspective, that's really rather unusual. Adore, tell us about Adore.
Thanks, Ian. Morning, everybody. Some of you might know me, some of you won't. I've worked with Lawrence and the L&T Group for about 25 years now, and so spanning the development of Orchard Care Homes, Ideal Care Homes, latterly the Oakdale Care Home Group. Adore Care, which Ian touched on before, is actually what's called a Danforth partner. So Danforth Care Homes has two segments to it: the main kind of Danforth Care, and then a set of partners who have a stakeholding, a shareholding in the Adore business for me, and my kind of co-investor is in effect through Danforth. So Adore Care has two care homes. Weavers Court at a place called Rawdon, just on the outskirts of Leeds, opened in November 2022. And the Durham Gate Care Home, which is just south of Durham City, opened in November 2023. We've got two fantastic managers, and we operate obviously with Cool Care and a number of other systems that have been embedded over time across our businesses through which we have experience. So that's Adore Care Homes in a nutshell at present.
Thanks, Andrew. Am I right in saying that Adore, your Durham one, is one of the first care homes that's been built in quite a long time in the Durham area?
It's the first one in 15 years in the Durham area. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. So market outlook, I think the vast majority of people on this call are fully aware that there's a wave of aging population that's kind of on its way in the timeline, if you like. So the boomer generation is coming up to requiring care, and from a sort of a wider business perspective, that does create an awful lot of opportunity for growth, and that's something that definitely Danforth and the other group homes are capitalizing on. Life expectancy is extending. So for males 65, it's 18.5 years, and females it's 21 years from the age 65 onwards. So that's kind of on the way up, 20 years as an average. The length of stay in care homes is extending. The analysis is approximately 30 months. There is a reducing capacity in the market. On average, 16 care homes are closing every month. Anybody wants to have a kind of look at the likes of Savills or any of those kind of sort of property investors and property consultants will tell you more granular data on that. But it's certainly, the stock is aging and homes are closing, and there's a definite deficit in quality. Only 37% of the care home UK stock was registered 37% was registered pre 1990. Only 29% of care homes include wet rooms accommodation as standard, and that's definitely driving a desire for what is effectively the more luxury end, more like living in a hotel, more all-inclusive. Definitely seeing that from a lot of our customers. Far more of them are kind of moving away from billable extras towards all-inclusive, or at least sort of attempting to sort of put certain sort of areas of what they would normally charge explicitly for into the overall costings. So the people just got a lot less to worry about. And as I said to somebody the other day, if you're booking a hotel room, you have a certain level of standards, and people have those standards now. Care homes are sort of being raised, and hence, I'm talking to Adore that operate luxury care homes. It's very much of that model. So, Andrew, data sources. When we were putting these slides together, you said there's a number of different places where you get information from. I popped them on the slides. Tell us a little bit about kind of what information you're gathering, and sort of how you go about doing it.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. So just a little bit of a pickup from your last point there. You mentioned that we have a luxury care setting. It's certainly a very comfortable care setting. I attended last week the launch of the Luxury Care Home Guide by Knight Frank and Coutts, and I very much came away with the view that the L&T Care Developments product is probably at the very top of the middle and just under the absolute boutique and premium brands. So what I did come away with was a strong feeling that our proposition to customer is in a perfect space, more perhaps of an everyman space going forward than necessarily absolute tip-top premium end of the market. And that makes it very important, of course, that the operation of the care home business is backed up by good quality processes and systems that are clear, visible, and understandable by the management team, and can be translated to the staffing teams and others quite easily. The Cool Care system is probably the cornerstone of how we manage the businesses. And its two biggest components are the inquiry management and the workforce management. Inquiry management in terms of logging inquiries that are coming forward, dealing with how they are managed, both in terms of information that's gathered, looking at that content. Is it sufficient? Is it good? How it's then followed up, and then very clearly sort of demonstrating how we move from an inquiry to perhaps an assessment, and then an assessment to an admission, and sort of tracking that path. And the system allows us to be able to do that. The workforce management is largely comprising of the time and attendance, the clock-in system, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, and others may use different platforms that have a similar feature. But that enables the staffing module, the rota management, to be managed clearly, and important for care home managers to be able to manage their care home identical to their rota setup, so that they've got a good routine and a good platform with which to ensure that they're delivering the right care hours, but they're not deviating from that. And the benefit of using the rota setup and rota management in Cool Care is that there's then not the sort of bun fight that might have occurred a few years ago, when you haven't got a system and you're constantly juggling who's going to be working when and how, and backwards and forwards with telephone calls and so forth. So the workforce management, the staff rota system is absolutely integral. That fits in with time and attendance, of course, and that can then feed into payroll on a monthly basis. We obviously When we get to the end of the month, we're looking at all of that. We'll have tracked it through the month. We look at any changes on a weekly basis in terms of any variations that perhaps have occurred, any additional hours, any holiday hours, any absence, and we seek to ensure that there's complete authorization of that all the way through the month, and we track that on a weekly basis. The ability to log into CoolCare from anywhere at any time allows that visibility to be good to management, good to the board, and it enables feedback to the unit manager, the care home manager, to keep on top of those things as the month progresses, so that there's not then a great deal of work to backtrack at the end of the month. And then the final component is the resident invoicing. That, I suppose, is the eventual product from your inquiry management. So the life cycle of a brand new resident starting life in one of our care homes will have been seen and narrated through the inquiry management process. They then become a resident in the care home, and when they do, there's an automatic transferability of the data that we've gathered in the inquiry management section that allows that resident to be put in place straight away. And as that moves forward, we can use CoolCare for holding all of the documentation that relates to the invoicing process. So the contracts, the first set of invoices, fitting in with any invoice dates. If you've got a local authority funded client, you can attach the CHISA agreement or the local authority contract into CoolCare as well. And if you've got somebody who's on deferred payment, so anything that is relevant to that contract that you might have in the past normally held in a hard copy file, or perhaps on your computer system or a shared drive, can be downloaded to sit into that residence record in CoolCare. So there's immediate access to all of that data. And CoolCare can then generate the invoice relevant to that resident and every other resident. It produces a report. I, as an owner, can then look over that report. I can cross-check that with the manager, and I can make sure that the clients are being invoiced appropriately. Anything you want to sort of bring in on that, Ian?
No, that's great. I mean, if the whole care home thing doesn't work out for you, Andrew, you've got a job here if you're interested. That's brilliant. Yeah, that's excellent. So interesting, you said that you're checking on a weekly basis, the workforce. So
yes.
what kind of things are you looking out for? What's your sort of, from a macro view, from a higher up view, rather than a kind of like, Tracy did an extra shift. What are you looking for?
So I think we're all aware that when you've got a computerized system, you're feeding information into it. And in order to be able to ensure that you're getting the maximum benefit from the system, you as an operator want to make sure that the data you want to see is going in. And the only way that you can check that and manage it is to look at your data daily and weekly to know that it's there. So customarily, what I will do on a weekly basis is I'll set the date parameters for the previous week in the inquiry management, for example. I'll look at the inquiries that have come in. I'll be able to look at the narrative that's behind those and get a little bit of a feel for it. If I've got any particular questions, I can go back to the care home and ask that, and I can get some feedback. I can then see if we're moving towards any assessments from those inquiries. I can get a feel for how good each inquiry is and whether it's likely to develop into an admission. And so by doing that weekly and then cross-checking that with the care home, it obviously forces and causes the care home to be able to input that data, because the relevance of having the system and the data is useless unless you've actually got the input. So my advice to anybody who is implementing CoolCare, of course, and any system for that matter, is to make sure that your data set is going in. And the only way you can do that is by you as senior management checking that on a weekly basis would be my recommendation. So I'll see that on the inquiry management, and obviously I'll build up some data around how those inquiries are flowing. I'm interested in things like how long it might take to move from inquiry to pre-admission assessment, and then from pre-admission assessment to admission. By tracking that on a weekly basis and building that up over a period, I can then start to develop some ratios and some significant data that helps us then to be able to manage things going forward, and gives us a good backwards look at some things with which to inform our marketing going forward as well. And don't forget that any inquiry that gets logged into CoolCare, you're able to select from where that inquiry has come. So it also tests the validity of your marketing budget.
That makes sense. So you kind of like you're looping back how they heard about you,
Very much so.
into the types of inquiries you're receiving,
Yeah.
and then analyzing whether or not that's what you're looking for, and then adjusting accordingly. So
Correct.
kind of classic feedback loop, really, isn't it?
Then on the workforce management side, on the staffing side, I think that CoolCare as a tool is actually a hugely valuable piece of software that will enable us as providers to be able to deal with some of and a lot of the data set that will be required under the single assessment framework for CQC. We'll all have some views on the implementation and usefulness of this single assessment framework going forward. But at this point in time, we know that we have to be able to deal with it. And we know that CQC are asking for more information all the time. So the greater the data that we're able to collect and analyze and interpret, the better equipped we'll be to be able to deal with that. And I think it's ultimately up to ourselves as providers to manage how we collect that data in such a way that we can then relate to CQC in a sensible format. So, for example, with the staffing situation, I would look at CoolCare retrospectively each week and check that we've had the appropriate levels of staff for the number of residents that we've had. So I'll typically look at the management time, the attendance of manager, care manager, deputies, number of care staff on shift during the day, number of care staff on shift at night, and I'll plot that into a table, which is a little bit of a repeat to some extent of the rota, but it allows me to be able to interrogate the data and know that we're delivering what we've set out to deliver in the first place. And each of you as providers may have different types of care that you're delivering to your care groups, but you will still want to know that you are delivering the right hours. You'll want to know the ratios of care, of staff to care, of either care hours delivered to residents, and ratios of admin staff and ancillary staff to that. So by interrogating your data regularly and in a routine fashion, it allows you to build that up. Similarly, I'll take a forward look at the rota for the forthcoming week, and sometimes one might see that there's a gap or two. Sometimes one might see that the manager clearly has to do a little bit of juggling about, but at least I know that, and then I can speak to the manager and say, what's the plan around X afternoon or X night to be able to show that we've got the appropriate cover. You can then very easily track things like probation dates, supervisions, and appraisals, and also training. I think that's one of the points we perhaps just missed out on the admin system there, Ian. But for the benefit of the audience, you will obviously want to be able to know that your staff are on top of their training, and the CoolCare platform behind each member of staff allows you to be able to pull reports off individually, but also collectively, with which you can then see clearly whether you are on top of your training. So as long as you're going into it in a routine fashion, the frequency is regular, you will build up your data and you will see information coming back from that, rather than just hoping that it's doing something. You have to use it much the same way as when you're driving your car. You're constantly looking at your dashboard. You're assessing your speed. You're assessing how much petrol or how much range you've got on your electric car, etc. And your system will give you information as to tire pressures and all that sort of jazz. So it's a very similar thing. It's all about the inputs, but it's the regular routine look at it, interpreting that data that's relevant to your organization and feeding it back to the staff. So when I do my weekly look, which then culminates in part of the monthly report, on a weekly basis, I can feed that back to the managers, and it gives them a little bit of a flavour as to what they should be looking at. It also allows them to understand that I'm interested in what they're doing, and if they need any support, I can give them that. So,
excellent. I've got a question. Somebody's come through from anonymous attendee regarding populating the system. I take it you have to employ a full-time data inputter (brackets administrator) to allow the, and I'm not sure what that last word is, but scrutiny, I think, is the word. Do you employ a full-time data?
No, I think anonymous questioner raises a good point. Obviously, it's I think when you're commissioning a brand new care home, setting up a new business, it is easier to start to fill up your data as you are going. I think when you're implementing Cool Care into an existing business where you're transferring how you currently do your systems into the Cool Care, then I would agree that you have to, in a sense, stop the Clapham omnibus to be able to get all the data in. And if that means then employing somebody or setting some staff time aside to do that, I would certainly recommend that that's the way to do it. After that, it should be routine to your managers, your administrators in your care homes, your back office staff, if you've got a team that are dealing with that, your regional managers, to then administer that information and make sure the data is going into the system on a regular basis. It shouldn't require you to employ somebody separate or in addition to, because by the very nature, each individual care home will have a far better idea of what it's doing at any given point in time. So the relevance of inquiry management and dealing with staffing issues and inputting that is better done by that care home.
That makes perfect sense. So you don't have a data person, your equivalent of head office or anything?
We've got several in point of fact, because it's the administrator in each care home plus the manager.
Right, they are just the people that we put this data in. Obviously, from a time and attendance, people clocking in and out, people are, that the system is generating that information. And I certainly can say from a new implementation perspective, as in an existing care home, new implementation, we kind of recommend a bit of a line in the sand. I think that's what you said, really, but that line in the sand of what you do and you don't put into Cool Care. And it's interesting because we get people asking, oh, well, I want everything in one place. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that. But do I devote months of work to put everything in one place when actually I could say before April 2024, it's in that place. And then after April 2024, it's in this place. And we often recommend not moving everything over because the effort in moving it exceeds the effort in looking for it in the future in that other place. It's the same place as So I think but not every organization chooses that. Some choose to do that, some don't. So tell me a little bit about kind of what the information you're like gathering from your care system, which you yourselves use person-centered software. Just for the audience, Cool Care integrates with person-centered software. So when you have a new inquiry, you can press a button and the data will appear as a new service user in PCS. The same applies if you have Nourish. And also when you onboard a new staff member, you can press a button and a new staff member is created automatically within the PCS and Nourish software. So those happen to be two integrated partners, but you use PCS. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the techie characters have obviously facilitated that little bit of integration, which is pretty useful. So as a new resident becomes a resident of Cool Care, we're able to transfer that into person-centered software. We're obviously looking to build up a care plan. From my point of view, I want a care plan to be built in effect within 5 working days of a new resident coming into one of our care homes, and we can see that through the data system on person-centered software. Be building up the appropriate risk assessments, and then we're using person-centered software to be able to track things like falls, accidents, incidents, weight loss or gains, hydration, a forward visibility around each individual person to be able to help administer their care. That, of course, doesn't necessarily feed into Cool Care in any way. It's a separate system in of itself, and both person-centered software and Nourish are both very good systems in being able to do that. But it's part of the data collection. So in terms of weekly KPIs and monthly KPIs that may be around the resident behavior and the management of those residents, that builds up to your overall monthly report. I'm sure all operators will run a similar sort of process to be able to know how well or otherwise they're delivering care, and to be able to flag up whether they've got any particular trends with certain residents. Are falls happening in a particular area of the care home? Are they happening at particular times? Is it certain residents? How are we managing that? It allows you to go back to the care plan individually, look at different care interactions, and then perhaps have a more detailed conversation with care staff at either handover levels or flash meetings in the morning, or a specific meeting to be able to, better deliver the care service that you're providing.
That's brilliant. Excellent. So I've got a question, and I think it's actually possibly because my slide is not as full as it could be. I've got 3 questions, but the first one is, do you include any resident nurse call information with your care plan or wider data analytics? So I think you alluded to that. You do. Yeah. It's not on my list of things. That's my fault, because I wrote the presentation of Andrew's insight, but I missed that out. But nurse call, what do you do?
Yes, we do. It doesn't necessarily go directly into the person-centered software system. We have a reasonably advanced Quantec nurse call system in our care homes. I can access the data remotely at any given point in time. I can set date parameters to see the number of calls. To interrogate that to the number of calls per room, the time it's taken to be able to attend to those calls. We can set up some parameters. For example, we'd prefer for all calls to be at least answered within 3 minutes of calling. So we'll have some KPIs within our monthly report that shows that, or otherwise, as the case may be. So that's how we look at that. It's very much foursquare to our data, and it's a case of bringing that together in our own monthly reporting.
Got you. So that's one of your KPIs. Excellent. Yeah. I've got some other questions. I'll quickly answer them. Is there anything in pipeline to get the data to flow the other way around from PCS to Cool Care? The answer to that is no. So i.e. setting up a resident in PCS starts a resident profile in Cool Care. No explicit plans on that. The reason being is it was decided by PCS and Cool Care that you kind of have to have a single source of truth, and likely the best single source of truth is the admin or manager. So deputy manager, admin, sort of people. They would be onboarding that resident, and then it then gets transferred to PCS. If you kind of have a both way direction, you lose sort of sight of what is the right answer. If you like, you end up you can have multiples. So that, yeah, it's deliberately a single direction, because if anybody knows if the person's been admitted, it should technically be in the sort of the admin area would know that first, put it onto Cool. And bearing in mind that Cool Care's got inquiry management, technically Cool Care system knows about the resident before the PCS system, so that's kind of why it goes that way around. And then does CoolCare integrate with other systems? We do integrate with other systems, but the two care planning systems is PCS and Nourish. They're the market leaders. They're the largest. They have the biggest market share, the most popular. We don't have a third kind of option at the moment. We're always interested in finding out more, but we don't specifically have any on our horizon. If anybody wants to ask any questions about kind of sort of future developments in our system, you can email me with that email address. I think that's currently showing. So that's excellent, Andrew. I know that you guys use a digital visitor sign-in, and when they're leaving, they kind of leave a bit of feedback as well. Tell me a little bit more about that. Kind of what do you do with this kind of sort of thing?
Yeah, it's basically an electronic iPad that has a software program in that allows us to log in visitors. So it's not a handwritten book, and it's certainly not one of these handwritten books with this awful grayed out stuff for GDPR reasons. It's a secure login. Information goes in, and then it kind of disappears to the view. But it's in there. I think we found it very useful twofold. One is it's easy for people to kind of sign in and out. It remembers them so that when they come back in again, there's already some data there. That also allows us to be able to track how frequent they might be visiting their loved one. And when it comes to things like having resident and relative meetings, that data set is also quite important to us, because we look at that data. And if, for example, as can sometimes be the case, I'm sure, a particular relative has a certain comment or an observation on their experience in the care home, but we can quickly see whether that person's been in the care home of sufficient time and period and frequency to be able to make that comment, perhaps, or we can invite them to come in further. And then secondly, certainly in the past, as far as CQC is concerned, and I think probably the same going forward in terms of this sort of data driven inspection process that they're embarking upon, the ability to replay to CQC that there's been 2,500 visitors in the space of three months, and this is the profile, these are the times, these are the frequency, to be able to demonstrate that we're not restricting visiting hours in any sense. We're not trying to covertly manage when people can kind of see their loved ones, and we've got a complete open book. I think is a really useful piece to be able to play back.
That's really interesting. I mean, I did actually happen upon a customer of ours who was also a customer of Person-Centered Software, and they had Person-Centered Software's digital reception, which CoolCare now sell as well. So you can kind of get it from us as well. And they'd had an inspection under the new single assessment framework, and they spoke so positively. It was quite ridiculous how they're like it. The CQC thought it was absolutely amazing. She used the word amazing, which I never heard a sort of an inspection, so people thinking anything's amazing. So they were really impressed by the fact that you have this. It's ticking the box of the experiential feedback. So we were using the service and then leaving feedback, positive, negative, neutral, and then being able for the manager to be able to say, well, look, everybody, look, team, look at all this positive feedback. Isn't this wonderful to hear? Neutral, okay, we could do better. And any negative feedback, they're able to immediately identify that and then work on that to improve that area. And then they can evidence that has happened when the CQC come along. So it's kind of a fantastic catch-all. So yeah, and I've just got a question come through. So are you using PCS digital reception? You use a different brand. We've got PCS's version. It's connected to PCS, so the difference is minimal. They're very, very similar. The PCS flavor is that when you update your feedback, when you're visiting somebody, it can automatically update the care plan in PCS of that visit. It's a nice to have. It really is a nice to have. It's not the most important thing in the world, but it's effectively the system is very, very similar. But that's just a little extra that the care plan gets a note saying, John Smith visited at this time for this amount of time, etc. So it kind of takes a little bit of collation out of the process and updates the care plan. So there you go. And then other sources as well. I mean, you're giving periodic feedback to the staff anyway as part of your kind of your weekly, in reviews. You're also doing your sort of your kind of more monthly KPIs as well, and then sort of other sort of feedback sources. So anything you'd like to add on that area?
No, we've touched a little bit on the sort of routine KPIs that we look at. Obviously, we'll build up our monthly report based on things like accidents, incidents, near misses, weight loss, etc. New residents in, residents out, deaths, discharges, safeguardings, all those sorts of things. I think the important thing to do with that data is always to do the little bit of a stand back. I think all care home businesses, and probably the bigger that a business gets, it's easier for this to happen, is that there's a data collection, but not always the stand back, the helicopter view, and what is this telling us. So I think that's one of the key things from a management point of view that must be done. It's great to have the systems, but you must interpret the information and always do that stand back. And I think taking the sort of 360-degree view, in a sense, of all the systems that you've got and the information coming in is important. But the main thing that I would like to impress, perhaps with relevance to the use of the CoolCare system and obviously the PCS as well, is that it really is all about frequency and routine, and extracting the information from that data with which to inform you of what you're doing. And I think for me personally, in Adore Care Homes, currently only two care homes, but in a sense we're able to behave like a bigger, more corporate operator. Obviously I've got the benefit of the Danforth partners behind me, but we all sort of operate to a very similar governance and system and process. And I think that's also important for I think it's an important message for anybody in the sector to a degree, because at some point in time you may either look to finance or refinance, or you might want to expand, or you might want to sell. And the better that you've got your systems and process in place, and the more obvious that looks as though it can be integrated with a larger partner who may look to purchase you, then that's got to be an advantage.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think it's and that's one of the reasons I felt it was really relevant to have Andrew Long from Adore. I find that when we did a webinar with Matt Lowe of L&T Care Development, and you're talking about like 40 plus care homes, I felt a number of people were like, well, yeah, you would do all this, wouldn't you? Because you're ginormous. Whereas it's kind of it's great to hear it from getting it right first time from a relatively smaller operator. Not that it's a small operation, but it's you're not sort of 40, 50 care homes. It's 2 care homes, but you're kind of doing it the way you mean to do going forwards, which I think is a very good lesson. So a couple of kind of key metrics here. Now, this is one that sort of like for Andrew to sort of speak about, but I know that having done webinars before, people kind of like a couple of really interesting sort of top tips, and I sort of kind of opened it up there. But you do have your weekly KPIs, and you are looking at a lot of different things. Is there any sort of specific, inquiry metrics that you sort of say couldn't live without, got to know, I want everybody to be aware of this? You mentioned about time from initial inquiry to completion, and also sources of inquiry. Any others?
No, I think that we all as operators are sometimes looking at, well, what's the elixir of life here? What actually makes everything work? And there's never necessarily one absolute silver bullet that works. So it's a combination of things that you're looking at any point. That said, the regular interrogation of your data and looking at it and building up some stats from it allows you to be able to analyze it in a more meaningful way. So if in its simplest form you had 20 inquiries in one of your care homes last week, but none of those inquiries ever became a resident, you'd really want to know why. And equally, if you had 20 inquiries in a week, you then want to say, well, what's caused that? What's generated that spike of inquiries? What are we doing about those? Is there a difference between 10 of those inquiries and the other 10? How are we handling those, and how are we handling them positively to perhaps bring them to become admissions into our care home? So, a ratio that I might want to look at is the time taken between an inquiry coming in to becoming an assessment, and then how quick after that assessment are we then able to convert that inquiry into an admission. And that can change whether your inquiry is a purely private fee-paying client, for example, or there are other factors that might influence that client's funding capability, which might sometimes elongate the time scale of that person becoming admitted. But it allows the business to be able to jump in the intervening period and assist that. And in the constant build-up of occupancy and ensuring that your occupancy is on top, that's a sort of key area to look at.
That makes a lot of sense. So staffing wise, you've already alluded towards it anyway. So you're kind of, this is the plan. This is and then this is what we've rotated. And then this is what we might have had. You mentioned extra additional hours. And then you take that data out as well. We had a question come through from somebody else saying, does CoolCare prepare that information for you, or do you have to extract it? The answer is CoolCare does have reports that have that information.
Yep.
I know that you yourself kind of want even more. You want a richer, broader tapestry and more holistic view. So you kind of take that data out and then do more with it. Which is kind of, I suppose it's all about keeping you on track, really. As in, if I had a plan and I believe in my plan, did I deliver on the plan? And if not, why not?
Yeah.
Any other metrics in there?
I think that there are a number of reports that come out of CoolCare, and often or not, when you guys kind of hand the system over, there'll be some good fundamental rudimentary training done to be able to get yourself going. But what I would definitely suggest to any admin team or the senior management is go and play with the system a bit. Once you've got your data in, go and pull out reports on time and attendance, or holidays, or absence. And these are things that we'll look at on a weekly basis, and building that up into our monthly reports. It's very easy to be able to extract that data from CoolCare once your system's running properly, because you can set your date parameters and you can see if there's any trends, if there's any particular pieces of behavior. On occupancy management, one of my sort of favorites, if you like, is looking at the occupancy between two dates and noting where there's been discharges or otherwise in that period, so that when I'm tracking the care hours or the ratio of staff, I can very accurately measure that for the residents that may have been in the care home on a daily basis. So if one day we might have 45 residents in, and then there's been 2 discharges, that's down to 43. So that week's report, as I'm tracking it through, can go from 45 on a Wednesday to 43 on a Thursday, might be 43 for the rest of the week. That then is relevant to the output of the care ratios and ratios of staff at any given point in time. So it makes it accurate, it makes it real time, and it makes it therefore reliable and reassuring to such as CQC. And in pursuit of greater refinement of the data, the reporting features that are available in CoolCare are really quite useful. Equally as well, in terms of financial performance and controls, you can see at a glance on your dashboard what your occupancy is. You can, for me, for example, I'm a big believer, just as a business model, having a set fee right across the board, and maybe of no surprise to the audience that given the L&T care development stable from which I come and the assets that I operate, every care home room is exactly the same. So I can set the fees accordingly, and that enables me to spot instantly by looking at the dashboard if our fee contracts are correct or not correct, because the average fee should be equalized right across the board. So it allows me to then go into the resident records quite quickly, have a look down the list, and I can spot if there's a variation. There might be a legitimate reason for that variation at that point in time, but it allows me to pick that up. So there's great ability to have that oversight. The key, as I reiterate right from the beginning, is all about frequency and routine and kind of doing it on a regular basis. And it becomes a little bit what's the right word? It becomes a little bit addictive. When you can kind of log on an evening time and start going through that. And similarly with PCS, I think it's great to be able to see a new resident coming into a care home. And then you can have a look at how the care notes are building up and how the care plan's building up, and just be comforted that your team are doing what they should be doing.
That's interesting. What you mentioned there, something that Matt Lowe mentioned in his webinar earlier on, late middle of last year, in which the very nature of the fact that the homes are all the same size, and they've got similar kind of staffing levels and similar kind of care levels, does allow you to kind of have a trend analysis. You can kind of spot the outliers by the very nature of the fact that, all things being equal, all things should be equal, and then kind of slightly out of kilter, you can kind of spot it quite easily. You don't necessarily need to kind of run a macro or an analysis, or you can just kind of spot it as as a human. You kind of go, that seems strange. And also, just for the audience as well, Cool Care's been developed over a long period of time. So Andrew mentioning that sort of the figures don't quite add up is something that the system can be set to kind of automatically do. When you've kind of got, you've got missing contracts, you don't have numbers in the system, it flags it up all over the place, so you can't miss it. It's obviously going to get pulled through eventually, but because we're trying to build for something that's got zero value, but it flags it up early as well. So lots of flags to sort of say, from a computer's perspective, this is supposed to have a figure in it, but it does not have a figure in it. Human, do you think maybe you want to put a figure in there? And I think that's, again, gives you the wider things, as in the figures are not in there, or the contract values are not in there. But then Andrew's looking at it from a more kind of like, the figures are in there, but that's not a figure that we normally would have. What's that about? Excellent. Really, really helpful. I mean, yeah. So I've got a kind of a slightly strange slide here in respect to about kind of information sharing. Now, you mentioned you have your regular meetings and reports, and I imagine Excel, CSV files are featured quite heavily. Pointing at the board, etc. But there's a couple of other things that you do as well. You've got Cool Care's virtual notice board, which is that TV screen. It's a small device that turns TV screens into. It kind of connects them to Cool Care in order to display what you want to display. So I suppose the first question is, what do you have up on there? The second one is, just out of interest, there is a digital reception on your reception there. So just in the case anybody's wondering what that looks like, and then this staffing levels chalkboard, which I found fascinating. But virtual notice board, what do you intend to sort of pop on there, and what does staff tell you and residents tell you about having this information available to them?
Yeah, I mean, it very much is what it is, and it's sometimes what I call the shop window of the reception area. I like to see the virtual notice board, properly completed. It often tells me that the home is it's integrating its thought process as to what it's doing that day, or that week, or that month. Obviously, that relies on some inputs, and that needs to be done by often the front of house manager, the administrator in the care home, to make sure it's good. But obviously, I can dive into that, and I can help to sort of give it some content if need be. And I think that's a good thing generally about the system as a whole, because it's, you know, it's an online system. People can kind of share and dip into the data at any point. But on the virtual notice board, as your staff clock in, it will show who's in on shift, and it will bring a picture up of that member of staff, providing you've taken a picture and loaded that into CoolCare. So a resident or a relative coming into the care home can visually see who's in. They get an immediate impression of the number of people that are there, that are looking after their loved ones, and they can recognise people. So if they're coming in to see a particular person to speak about a care plan, and they can ask for that person, they've got an idea of what they look like. It will also track through today's events. So if there's anything particularly happening in the care home, we can load that on. If it's somebody's birthday party, for us, if we're doing resident of the day, we'll focus on that resident of the day, and we'll put their picture and a little bit of narrative about that person. So again, it brings the home to focus on that, and it also lets visitors to the home know that we're doing that process of resident of the day. I think you can probably see from the picture that's on the screen there, there's the meal times. So you've got pictures of the breakfast and the dinner and the tea. And what we get our catering teams to do is, when they're preparing meals, when they'll serve a dish up in the kitchen, we ask them to take a photograph of that to show how that dish is meant to be served. They log that into our SharePoint system. That then can be put into CoolCare, and we obviously have a picture of that meal on an ongoing basis. I'm sure you'll realise that steak and chips, or coq au vin, or haddock and new potatoes might be served more than once during a quarter period. So you've got that stable of photographs with which to populate that and give a bit of narrative behind it. Forthcoming events is a good thing. So any things that are coming up just allows people to get a feel for activities and excursions that might be happening, and any particular special occasion, so somebody's birthday and so forth. So it's a really good, as I say, almost shop window of the care home. And from a user point of view, from a management point of view, you can dip into that. You can administer it, and you can also see what's being shown in your care home. So it gives you a feel as to whether the home is kind of up to standard that day, and it's kind of, you know, on top of its game. The staffing levels thing, and I'm sure that people will have some views on this. This was something that an old colleague of mine, Stacey Lynn, who's the managing director of Ideal Care Homes, and did a fantastic job with that business. She implemented this as a means of being able to illustrate to staff and visitors what the staffing level is relative to the dependency level of the residents that are being looked after in the home. So as we're building up our care plans in PCS, we will look at the dependency level, and we'll then input those dependency levels into the Care Forum tool, of which I'm sure some of you are aware, and that will generate a number of staff relevant to those dependency levels. We typically always try and staff a little bit ahead of those levels in any event, and therefore we want to be able to put that across graphically, and because it needs to be changed, and we want it to be changed easily, and it could have, for example, have to be changed of an afternoon if somebody goes off sick or whatever it happens to be. So that's a good way of demonstrating where we're at, and gives some comfort to visitors and professionals that we're dealing with that on a proper basis. Equally as well, as a good reference point, it can often be the case that staff are quick to suggest that if there's a couple of people are absent, they're short-staffed. Whereas actually you might be able to say, well, we're not short-staffed, we have a lesser number of staff than we would usually have, but we still have a greater number of staff than we need for the dependency calculation for the residents that we're currently looking after. That particular board was, back in the 8th of August, when we were looking after 29 residents at Weaver's Call. I think it was a picture that Ian took at the time. But it's a really useful ready reckoner. And of course, when I come into the care home, the two things that I see straight away are the notice board and that board. And I always check the date on that board to make sure it's up to date.
It's very front and center, isn't it? You kind of as a visitor to the home, it's like, oh, well, I don't have to ask any questions about what this means. It tells me exactly what I want, exactly what it's saying. And it's like, well, that's very reassuring. I think reinsurance is good. And I think the virtual notice board, obviously we sell it, so I'm going to be a proponent of it, but it's very, very popular because you can kind of program it so the catering team can repeat the menu on a certain basis. You pop that into it from a calendar perspective, and you don't have to do it again. It'll keep rolling and rolling. And you want to change it. You don't have to rewrite the whole thing. You can just change a menu out. So excellent. So I kind of put together a little kind of slide here. It's kind of the continuous improvement model. It's nothing particular rocket sciencey about gathering information and data, checking the data is good, analyzing and sort of monitoring, using that data kind of keep on top of everything, and then sort of feeding it back to the team to basically do it again. So you can kind of focus on good care delivery. Anything to add to that? I mean, you've already mentioned that you have regular updates on any by default, but you also have special meetings about special things that you want to feedback on information that you've gathered. Is there anything else you'd like to say? I think most people watching this kind of get the idea of a feedback model, but anything?
No, I think that we're all of us as providers will be perhaps emotively attached to our businesses to a greater or lesser degree. We're caring individuals by nature, and of course it's easy to sort of look at care as a touchy-feely kind of human business, which it is. How is that translated into data? Well, in its purest form, we will all look at our accounts monthly as we're producing our management information, annually as we're doing our year-end accounts, and that financially is the product of what we do as a business. It tells us whether our performance is correct, whether our costs are under control, and whether we're making an appropriate profit to be able to reinvest. If you consider that all the other data that you're using to manage your business helps to generate the best financial results, that's probably the best way that I can describe the value of that data for you. And it's only by doing that regularly and with routine that the value comes out of it. An old manager of mine years ago said he was looking forward to managing the business by the numbers. And at that point, this is probably going back 20 years, my heart sank a little bit because I'm not by nature necessarily a numbers person. But over time, the numbers are actually what counts, oddly. And I think that as we're going into a territory in the future which is much more data orientated, it's absolutely vital that the human emotive side of us gets to grips with those numbers, but deals with them in the way that is meaningful then to us. So I actually find it quite a cathartic process to go through the KPIs and help to put together the monthly management report and the operational dashboard and so forth, because it tells me graphically whether we're doing the job right, irrespective of whether we've got a nice review on carehomes.co.uk or I've had good feedback from relatives. The numbers count, so data vital.
That makes a lot of sense. So I've summarized kind of what our discussions previously. So data, it provides insights. The information sharing brings confidence. So you're able to say, I do kind of know what's going on here, and share it with the team so the team know what's going on. I think I love the reception area that information is being fed back to anybody who wants to see it. your management time spent on quality. And I think it's a very important point when we're referring to the term of luxury, or you say comfortable, or the high end of comfortable. There's a lot too comfortable. You can have really nice furniture. I'm thinking more like if I was in a hotel. Oh, the furniture's lovely, the room's lovely, everything's fantastic, the food's great, but it was a nightmare to book, or it was a nightmare to get in, or at night, your administration of how everything works is just as important as the setting, if anything. So, quality can slip without anybody noticing. So it's the fact that you keep looking is very important. And then of course the team is able to deliver individual person-centered care. They can focus on the delivery of great care whilst everything else runs smoothly behind the scenes. So we're at just about 1:02. So closing remarks, just from my perspective, is there is a positive market outlook. We definitely see that from our own customers. We know that the average fees with the Cool Care is 1,142, 82% average occupancy of our Cool Care customers, and 54% of our customers have got self-funders. Sorry, our average is 54%. Management controls, very important as a sort of prerequisite for a well-run business, of course, but data and data analysis is really fundamental to that care business. So hopefully that's there. I've got a question here. Hi, Ian. I'm new to the care industry, so apologies if this is a daft question. How do you calculate your dependency ratio is done? Is it done automatically on Cool Care? So the Cool Care does not automatically calculate what your dependency should or shouldn't be, because that's entirely based on the individual resident's needs, and that comes from the care plans and where they're at in themselves. So it's not something that Cool Care really has the information to make that decision. But Andrew, you said you use a forum.
It's the So firstly, to the person that's asked the question, there's no such thing as a daft question at all. And if you're new to the care industry, welcome. It's a fantastic business to be in, and it can be extremely rewarding. If perhaps through Ian you want to send an email or your contact address, I'll send you a copy of the Care Forum tool, which will allow you to look at your dependency levels of your clients.
Yeah, and it's a question that's so every now and again we get asked in sales at Cool Care, can your system tell me how many staff I need to have based on the number of residents? And I often kind of have to put it back saying, would you really want a computer to be making that decision without any input from a human being? I'm not so sure. And of course, the definitions of what resident needs are quite varied. Tools get you a really long way along that journey, but you can even see from Andrew's own kind of chalkboard there, the tool says A, and they do A+. They're overstaffing, which, I mean, why would you overstaff if you don't need to? Well, there's reasons, isn't there?
I think the point there is, Ian, we're staffing to our desired level, not necessarily overstaffing for the sake of it. In terms of the proposition to customer and how you deliver all of that, we're staffing to a level that we want to be able to achieve.
Cool. So I've got someone else has just popped up saying, "Can I have that staffing tool, please?" What I'll do is I'll get that from you, Andrew, once we've come off this call, and I will be sending out to everybody on this webinar a link to the recording. It's a standard thing that we do, and in that we'll have the link to that. And if you want to ask any other questions of Andrew, you can get hold of him via a door. If you have any other questions for us at Cool Care, you go to our website. You can kind of request a demo. You can contact us on the sales@coolcare.co.uk email address. We are at the Care Show in London, the Care Show in Birmingham. We're doing another webinar on systems for staff retention, if you're interested, which is kind of using various different systems to help retain staff. We'll be doing another webinar later on in the year of systems to help you recruit staff. So we're available sort of for anything you might want to know. But just like to say a moment to say thank you very much, Andrew. That was very illuminating. I hopefully everybody has had plenty of answers. We were doing Q&A as we were going along, so I think we should be good. And yeah, that was sort of 60 people hopefully learned something. That's great. So thank you very much, everybody. There's no further questions, or just any last questions? If not, we'll sign off and call it a day.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you very much.